Hi, my name is Boogie Frantick. I represent the Mighty Zulu Kings, Great Winators, Funny Bones crew. I am from Los Angeles, California, and yeah, I'm a popper. I'm a hip hopper. I'm a freestyle dancer. How I started dancing, was I started like as early as 2 years old. Um, that's the first thing I knew was just to freestyle dance. It was like my first introduction to everything. As far as like who I learned from, I was mainly self-taught up until I was a teenager. Then I started to learn from uh, DJ Hayes, Zulu King DJ Hayes. I met a lot of OGs like Puppet Master, Boppin' Andre, a lot of b-boys that we had around us at the time, from Twilight 22, Goof Troop, Play School, my own crew back then, which was the Wrecking Crew. So there was like a lot of influences, but never really so much as a teacher, you know? What has influenced my dance mainly is like my everyday life. So when it comes to the way I dance and tell stories or use my hands, I just think about like where I grew up. I think about how I grew up. I think about, I mean, there's times where I've done battles and I'm writing graffiti. I mean, it's inspired by the culture. There's times where I'm doing certain ground moves and using the ground. It's inspired by the culture. You know, being mechanical isn't necessarily for me like just doing the robot. I grew up watching a lot of claymation movies, you know, a lot of animation films. Like, so everything that has some form of influence, like, is something I've experienced, you know, like watching horror films, watching movies in general. Like, there's just times where you get certain characters and certain moments out of a movie that just makes me, I want to implement that into what I'm doing, but I don't want to copy it. I just love the fact that the story is already there. So I get fed and inspired by everything that's around me. Trees, parks, rivers, lakes, oceans, rocks falling, paper flying, plastic bags flying in the air, random wind from the ground. Like, there's so much that we overlook in life, and I think I'm able to create like all this in one run, you know? So when I perform, it's like the wind comes up from the ground. In our brains, when we dance, we try to think too literal, but for me, it's more about how can I be abstract, but still be clear about something, you know? So I'm not trying to be perfect about what the story is, but I'm just showing like what my vision is, and I think that's what brings people into the movie that I create in the moment. So the link in like West Coast, I mean West Coast culture, West Coast street culture, West Coast lowriding culture, West Coast gang culture, like it's, you know, and then popping. Popping is, it's, for us it was a street dance, you know, like maybe for some of these so-called creators or creators, for them it was their inventions, you know. But I don't come from the funk era, so my inspiration comes from the streets, like the people I grew up around. And what people seem to forget is like you have some of the originals, and then you have what the originals have influenced, and then you get the result, you know. So for me, I'm the result of all of it piecing together, you know what I'm saying? And I don't necessarily dance like the people who claim to who started this dance or label it as popping. I represent the people who have given me something. I represent the people who have inspired me in some way. So when you connect me growing up on the streets of, you know, LA, East LA, and then San Fernando Valley, it's like, you know, both of my brothers were gang members. It's a connection. They were both dancers at one point. It's a connection. When I did time away in prison. I met an actual pauper in there, and I remember him telling me stories about the parades they would have in Compton. Like, it's so intertwined in the people and society. So what I see around the world is people trying to claim this same idea, and the difficult part about that is like you're claiming something that you're not from, and which is totally understandable. I'm not one of these people that try to police, but it's just a matter of, there's ways to do it without having to overdo it. You don't need to rock blue, red, black. You don't need to rock, bandanas. Like, it's unnecessary. But if that's what you choose, just understand, the difference between people who actually live it and people who claim it. And most likely the people that live it are going to always be offended by the people who claim it, because it happens on the streets every day. If you're dressed a certain way and you don't represent the actual neighborhood you live in, you will get a result. That's all I'm going to say. But it's just more so, these mentalities are, you're not necessarily like, again, we're not trying to police it. It's just a matter of understanding it. You got Japan representing Chicano culture, which is, again, like LA street culture, but it's all over California, and just in different ways. Chicano culture isn't just gang culture. Chicano culture is, being a revolutionary, being an activist, being a representation of, people's struggles. So all you're doing is only representing one part of a struggle, so there's just ways to really think about this, and a lot of us were dancers first before any of them were gangsters, so it just so happened that a lot of our OGs ended up in the gang life, but they were still dancing, and it just intertwines. It becomes a part of inspiration. One of my first inspirations was a guy in a wheelchair named Randolph, and he got shot, so he was in a wheelchair. He was paralyzed from the waist down, and he would roll over to me and be like, "Hey man, check this shit out," and he'd start popping in his chair, and I was just like, damn. And he goes, "Yeah, I used to do like the lowrider," and it's just, there's labels for everything because it relates based off of what they're living. So yeah, he may not have been the inventor, but he's the one that put in my brain, when I drop into a W, I'm doing a lowrider position. So at one time we called it the lowrider. It's just, it's not about trying to be politically correct. It's just, we're correct regardless, because this is what we live and this is what we're surrounded by. Sorry if that offends you. Tips for poppers. Tip 1. There is more than one way of doing this dance. There is more than one way of doing this dance. Study it. Study the differences. Understand the differences. Don't be so selfish. Share. The way we were able to inspire one another was by sharing. The way I can dance different from another dancer is by sharing. I learned by battles. It's a different world today, so battling somebody, calling somebody out becomes more about my ego versus your ego. When I was battling, it was my skill versus your skill. So it really starts to really respect the person across from you. Really respect their struggle, their dedication, their techniques, and then learn to understand how they're doing that. That's how we picked it up. That's how I learned to mix bopping and popping together, to mix animation and dime stops, to mix slow motion and waves. Like, I can mix and match because I've learned and studied and understood how to implement it in a different way. My advice is train not just the popping within itself, train the techniques, train how to do it without technique, then train it how to do it together. Exercise, keep yourself fit. You're doing competitions. It's round for round. Trust me, like, time yourselves, time your rounds. If you're gonna create a performance, come correct, dress appropriate, you know, really give the people a character of who you developed. Understand that, like, and just truly try to understand as much as you can, like, where this comes from and why it was created. You know, you can research a lot of old, like, Soul Train videos, but just know, like, Soul Train is giving you the commercialized vision that they wanted you to see, like an audience, TV. They were in control of what we watched. Doesn't necessarily mean that these guys weren't doing it outside of Soul Train. It means that, you know, this is what they lived. These were the selected few that were able to actually perform this. So there was many more. So the idea of, like, copying one person only is doing you a disservice, because there's so many more. So it's learning to understand that difference, you know? There is creators. If you are not from that era and you are trying to be an educator based off of some place you didn't come from, maybe you should come to that place, study it, have conversations with these people, and then become the educator that you need to be. It doesn't make you a know-it-all or a person that can become all of a sudden this historian. And, you know, it's like you're trying to give somebody only half of the book as opposed to the entire book. So yeah, it's there's a lot of advice I can give. What else? Body awareness. Learn to breathe with your dance. Learn to understand, like, your frustrations, and learn how to use that and make something positive from it. When you dance, it shouldn't be something negative. It shouldn't be about being negative. It should be a release of your negative energy. It's a way to, like, reformulate your frustration and develop something from it. It's not meant to hold you down and make you feel like you can't get better. That's something else happening in your life. Learn that it's separate, you know? Use this as a tool to help you through therapy, help you listen to music in a clearer way. Like, you don't necessarily always have to pop just beats that are meant for popping. I won't call it popping music. I'm not gonna call it that. But funk is also having fun. Dancing a funk is enjoying it. Dancing a funk is dancing with a partner. It's not just about popping. It's more than that, you know? And study more dances, locking, top rocks. They all come from the funk era, you know? Breaking comes from the funk era. It was all in the same generation. Understand that. You had locking, robot, then popping came. Just gonna leave it at that. My free words are, this was a really short interview, so don't take my word as like, this is it, this is all I need to know. And I know some of y'all are gonna comment and, you know, keyboard gangster on everything, but the reality is, like, I've lived this, you know, and I feel like you should be trying to do the same to inspire those underneath you. All I've ever done is try to inspire people to do something with an art form, to be creative, to get themselves out of struggles, because this helped me get out of my struggles. This helped me get out of my mental struggles. And all I've ever tried to do is just inspire people. So get off your fucking keyboard and do the same thing.